But the dope thing was him and how much he was requesting Jordan ones. Like Jordan ones is his favorite shoe, but like there was a request of like making sure he got a pair of whatever we were doing.
Welcome to another episode of the SoleSavy podcast. Today I am joined by former Oregon Ducks football player, former Nike and Jordan brand design legend, really. We're going to dive into all of his incredible work throughout his career, especially on the shoe right behind me, the AJ1, and then also entrepreneur, brand owner, NIL innovator, Garren Strong. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it. Peace and salutations. Peace and salutations.
There's just so many people in the industry that have had historical impacts on products and on the larger sneaker culture as a whole that we just never get to hear from. And you're one of those people when you realize the body of work you put out, still really early in your career too. And I'm just excited to hear your story and to share that with our listeners and to learn a little bit more. I want to start first by just setting the record straight for what was your role in regards to the AJ1 and kind of like for those I'm not familiar with the particular roles inside Nike, what was the name
Yep.
of your role and what were you responsible for?
Yeah, so I was the senior product marketer for the Air Jordan 1 franchise, and my responsibility and role or roles and responsibility was to really manage that, not only the product creation side, but the business side of the Air Jordan 1 and building it um, as a growth franchise and being the quarterback and the point guard, I guess, of the team of like things kind of moved how I could get the team to move
Yeah.
and working with, great folks in the design side from material design to color design, working with engineering and the team over there in Asia, to then even connecting with our operations guys. Like I was kind of the one that managed and shepherded the Air Jordan 1 franchise from concept all the way through to go to market pretty much.
The era that I always refer to when talking about this time period is like really a golden era for Jordan Brand when you're thinking about like 2016, 2017 ish. How does it feel now? Like first of all, I'm sure you went to campus and saw a ton of AJ1s. How does it feel when you see a shoe you either directly worked on or kind of indirectly influenced that shoe to exist? What is that
Yeah.
feeling like?
I think the first thing again is like I'm just honored, man, to have that opportunity. And going into that, there wasn't a lot of folks that I don't know if they didn't believe in me. I didn't know if they believed truly in the Air Jordan 1 and what it could do, but I know there was not the the biggest reception of the vision and strategy that I had. And so to see where it's at now and to see that my influences are still kind of there long after I've left, which has been 2.5 years now already, which is crazy to say. Um, it's just a huge honor and an accomplishment, but also at the same time, it's again another goal that I knew I would be able to do, and to have that done and to now look for the next challenge and build on those successes and those wins is kind of where I'm at. I don't dwell too much in the past. I'm very much more just like what's in front of me is like what we're needed to get after or what I need to get after.
Take me back to I'm guessing the year is like probably 2015, 16, 17-ish. You're making this pitch for the AJ1, and now it sounds ridiculous, right? To be like, this is the most popular shoe in the world. I have friends who've never been into sneakers asking me how they get them, how to do this. It's still happening in almost 2023. It's not like this era
Right.
ended. Um, but it wasn't necessarily a no-brainer idea at the time to be like, let's blow this up, let's diversify its portfolio, let's make sure that it serves everyone. What was that pitch like? And more importantly, what was your vision? Because again, people forget, like we were getting a Royal or a Bread every few years, maybe like five-ish
Right.
years, and we were getting OGs, and then like we got lows in 2013, 14, but they didn't hit. So it wasn't like the shoe was on fire. It's everyone's favorite shoe now, including mine. But a lot of people associate it with like it being really hot in the 80s, of course, when it got banned, and then there's some classics. The O1s are a classic to sneakerheads, but they weren't
Right.
mainstream shoes by any means.
Yep.
So it's hard for people to believe that actually took push from you and your teammates and a vision to see it grow like this. So what sparked that vision for you?
After I was the PLM for the training. After a year, the brand decided to divest or go away from training and
Hmm.
focus on just other businesses. And from when that happened, I then moved over, and there was like this transition period where I was leading retros for. So basically, retros, how we look at it is the one all the way through like the 14, and then
Hmm.
everything else was is a retro. But that was like super deep in the
Yeah.
vaults, really pull anything out at that time, and that was around like 2016. And we started to get more resources on that side of footwear. And at the time came to me and was like, yo, we're going to have some more people be added to the team for the workload. Because again, Jordan was really trying to grow and get after the numbers and just the overall business. And
Hmm.
so when I was asked that, and I had worked through a couple of seasons of retro, and that was like you had the footwear line of retros, so from 3 to like 6, and a number of units and SKUs and all that stuff. And then AJ1s were on the same product line or product plan as the retro, but it was looked at as, at the time, I felt as like afterthought. To
Hmm.
your point, let's get a couple of these high OGs out there. Mids were more for like the mall, and there were no lows. So it was really between high OGs and mids. And the number of SKUs though were like in the 10 to like 12. So 6 SKUs almost for each. And I was just looking at that. And every time I would go into brief like color and material, I felt myself always just saying, okay, and then we have the AJ1s and we need to do this and we need to do this and we need to do this. But then with like the retros, everybody was like excited about the retros. Well, if it's a 3, what stories are we telling about the 3? If it
Hmm.
was a 5, what are we telling this and that? So I went to him, and when he asked me, hey, do you want to stay on retros? I was like, to be honest, and this is Jamal, I think he's pretty much the person that allowed me to get to where I got to in the Jordan ones. So Maul asked me that. I told him, hey, let me actually break out the AJ one, because it was still looked at as a franchise, but it wasn't being worked on as a franchise.
Hmm.
So I was like, let me just work on AJ ones. And he
Yeah.
was like, you just want to work on AJ ones? I'm like, yeah, just give me AJ ones. And I'll focus on that with whatever few other sportswear models that I need to like build out a line plan.
In your interview with Jabari, the second half podcast, you touched on your retro experience and you talked about working on Team Jordans, like the Pro
Yep.
Strong, for example. And we live in an era of sneaker culture that's like it's very like dictated by memes, like the way like we
Right.
talk about
Right.
this, which is fun and it's funny. Like, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, I'm not like too old to appreciate how like how kind of like funny a lot of things are. But one thing that people get wrong all the time is like the significance of budget models, like a or takedown models, like a Team Jordan, like a Pro Strong, and in this case, like mids and lows. Like the non-hype mids and lows, right? Not
Right.
like the Travis lows, like the mids that go to the malls and the lows that go to the malls. Um, can you share a little bit about like how big that market is? Some people
Right. Right.
genuinely want to be able to go to the mall, find a shoe that reminds them of a part of their life or makes
Yep.
them feel cool, or sometimes even just that Jumpman logo on it, like it is enough to like give confidence to whoever is wearing that. What did you learn
Yeah.
about that market that makes it again so relevant?
Yeah. When we first started, my challenge was to do just that, make the mids and the lows as sought after as much as we did the high OGs, because it was
Mhm.
lopsided. It was just the high
Yeah.
OGs, to your point, it was just those folks that were like in the trends and hype beasts at the time, what you call them, and sneakerheads, which is now just, I don't even know what kind of term that is
Now it's like
nowadays. But
everybody with this with the phone
yeah, yeah, yeah,
basically.
yeah. Right. And for me, it was connecting with consumers that still love the brand, still was inspired by the brand, but maybe, didn't have the means to go out and buy $160 shoe at the time, but wanted to be a part of that and still wanted, that. that footwear to act as some confidence for them when they're going to school. Everyone out here is not adults that have
Hmm.
jobs and can buy 160, 180,
Yep.
$250 shoes. You do have these communities that, don't have as much money to spend outside of lunch, outside of their daily clothes, that
Yeah.
still though is inspired and really love the brand. And for us was to bring that experience of the same sneakerheads you talk about or the hype use that you talk about or when they're buying that high OG down to them in a mid and a low. And being able to rock those shoes every day with confidence. Even conversation around that, I think, I don't want to go too much in depth on this, but with these brands and when they collaborate and folks get upset about then the brand kind of taking some influence or being inspired by what the high heat what is like, yo, they got to make money off of the investment that they
Yeah.
put into. There needs to be a day-to-day business or a Monday through Friday business. So if you do see components from a collaboration that's now in line with a brand, that's because they've took, what was high heat, what was more of like a seeding phase, and where they got the eyes for those that could afford that shoe and that collaboration. And now I was trying to break it down for the masses.
What are some of like the key roles that were involved in your particular run? I know, like, just to name a few, we talked about, color design being important,
Yep.
materials design. Can you share a few of those that, as like the shoes when you were making are just really key roles for those of you not familiar with the back ends of creating a shoe?
A lot of folks think that we just have an unlimited budget to create a shoe
Hmm.
and that we're making all this money off of it and all that is like there's details sweat, all the way down to the lace tips to the type of rubber that we're using, insoles. So engineering and costing is huge. Development is probably the most underappreciated role there is in the footwear process. Because they do a lot of the dirty work and they're the ones that are usually saying no because of the budget that we have for each model or each colorway or the overall franchise. And so I think without development, if you don't have a good developer, you'll be stuck with either not growing and making the margins that you need to and still putting out high quality product. That was the biggest thing with the developers that I worked with is like, how do we, okay, if this is not the answer, what is the solution? I can always literally go to the break glass in emergency, in case of emergency, and drop a red, white, and black Chicago one and know that
Hmm.
that's going to smoke, know that we'll be right back where we were. But for me, it was again, like I said, I don't look too much in the past. Like I was trying to just push as much forward as possible to where it then gives us the right to do whatever we want as long as we want. You know what I mean? I think the one last thing is just having a great merchandiser.
One thing you mentioned, I gotta bring up because I always talk about it, and I'm glad to hear you say it organically without me asking. Was like people don't understand that like Jordan's the one brand that is not gonna go for the layup every single time when it comes to colorways. Like even just the Lost and Found Jordan 1 that's about to drop. So many comments saying, "Whoa, man! Like all they had to do was give us the 2015 or an 85 cut, et cetera, et cetera." I'm like, yeah, but then they wouldn't be Jordan brand if they gave the consumer what they want versus telling the consumer what they're gonna want with amazing storytelling and craftsmanship. That's what makes them that. Like they're not gonna go for the layup, and I always appreciated that.
And that was our conversation. Like we would literally spend evenings just going back and forth because you even get that pressure internally. Because again, it's a business. So if they seen something hit the season before or the year before, it's like we need to make another one of those.
Run
And
it
for
back,
us,
yeah.
it's like, no, that actually created us to create some or helped us create something new. I think the high OG sold out. If it wasn't a sellout, it was a 90% sell through every week, pretty much. Or anytime we dropped for those like
Yeah,
3 years, it would
yeah, for
and
sure.
these were new designs, new executions and all that.
Bread
And
Toe, Obsidian, Royal Toe, Court
man,
Purple, like new classics.
yeah, I think that's where if you wanted to like where maybe the challenges were, it was trying to convince folks internally of some of these colorways. Because then you also working with geos. Like we don't have
Hmm.
to go super into that, but you're now talking about geographies. And
Yep.
something that's happening in North America might be different than what's happening in Europe. That might be different what's happening in like Greater China. So you're dealing with those levels as well as um, color and material. This is from a product marketer's perspective. Color and material wanting to do something, developer saying yes or no, engineering and or factory saying we can't or we may be able to do something, the business side of things saying we need to do this and all that is like where my challenges were and where I like just tried to keep the integrity of the product and the strategy was around just new and fresh.
When was the moment, or what was the shoe when you were like, okay, I think we got something special here?
Trying to think, there was a there was a season I want to say it was probably
Rookie of the year season?
I think it was around that time. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
when
yeah.
we
There
were
was a
like,
lot of hitters in that season. Rookie of the year, Sports Illustrated. I think it
yeah,
was
and it was a lot
2018
of X,
holiday.
yeah. And that was around like just us exploring. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
let's see how far we can go without telling a pop story and or just moments. And like, can we get off some of these like secondary type of stories that people may question um, the true inspiration or the authenticity of it.
I do have to ask though, because I know for as much as the brand is built off of the man himself, it's not easy to get something approved by MJ, right? Like you, if you're telling personal stories about what he was wearing to this particular event on this particular day, it all goes through him. Do you have anything you can share about how that worked pitching him on stories about his own life on a shoot?
It was the best hand in the game story. And for us, it was like our inspiration behind it was truly that there is no other player ever that was as well rounded as Michael Jordan. And so when we started with the inspiration, we were just looking at kind of what can best describe or showcase or storytell that. And we came up with like poker hands because
Hmm.
the thought behind that is like at any given hand, even if it's not the greatest hand, there is another hand that can win. Like a three of a kind can win a poker hand, or you know what I mean, a flush can win a poker hand. So for us, is like, how are we able to tell that story in a tasteful way, bring in material that hadn't been really looked at as much with the suede
Yeah.
and a color blocking though that's familiar so that folks can understand where it's coming from, things like that. Like that's how we were working through a lot of these stories. Working with him, I didn't have too many run-ins with him because I'm very mindful and thoughtful of just everyone
Yeah.
and people around and what it means to the brand and not trying to put any extra light or pressure on us as a team internally as well as the brand. And like as much as I can stay away from that, I was really able to rock out. But the dope thing was him and how much he was requesting Jordan ones. Like Jordan ones is his favorite
Yeah.
shoe, but like there was a request of like making sure he got a pair of whatever we were doing, like even getting him into like lows and even mids. He had his own
Yeah.
perception, I would say, on mids at one point, but like getting him into those and all that, that was like real dope and something that I think the team thought was cool and was inspired by to like continue to do what they were doing.
If you enjoyed that conversation, head over to Apple or Spotify for the full interview. And while you're at it, subscribe to SoleSavy on YouTube for more original sneaker content.